The dust beneath Clara Garrett's boots had turned to mud from her own tears by the time she stumbled into Ash Fork, Arizona, with nothing but a carpet bag, and a heart she swore would never open again. It was late May in 1883, and the desert sun beat down mercilessly on the small railroad town that seemed to exist only because the Atlantic and Pacific Railroad needed a place to stop for water. Clara had stepped off the morning train with her shoulders squared and her chin lifted, but the weight of her past pressed down on her like an anvil. She was 24 years old and felt ancient, worn down by disappointment and the shame of a marriage that had crumbled like desert clay in a drought. Her former husband, Thomas, had been a banker's son back in St. Louis, handsome and charming until the day they married. Then the drinking started, then the gambling, then the nights he did not come home at all. When she finally left him after 2 years of trying to save something that had never really existed, her family had turned their backs on her. A divorced woman was a scandal, a failure, something to be whispered about in parlors and pitied in churches. So Clara had taken what little money she had saved from her work as a seamstress and bought a ticket west, as far as her funds would carry her. Ash Fork was not her destination so much as the place where her money ran out. She stood now on the wooden boardwalk outside the general store, watching cowboys ride past and freight wagons rumble through the rutted Main Street, wondering what on earth she was going to do next. The general store was a weathered building with a false front painted white, though most of the paint had peeled away under the harsh sun. Clara squared her shoulders and pushed through the door, hearing the bell jangle above her head. Inside, the air was cooler and smelled of coffee, tobacco, and leather. A middle-aged woman with graying hair stood behind the counter, eyeing Clara with the kind of shrewd assessment that came from years of sizing up strangers in a town where everyone who mattered was already known. "Help you?" The woman asked, not unkindly. "I am looking for work," Clara said, lifting her chin. "I am an experienced seamstress and I can cook, clean, and keep accounts. I am willing to do whatever honest work is available." The woman's expression softened slightly. "You just come in on the train." "Yes, madam. Got a place to stay?" "Not yet." The woman sighed, wiping her hands on her apron. "Name's Ruth Thompson. My husband and I run this store. We got a room out back we have been renting out now and then. Nothing fancy, but it has got a bed and a stove. You can have it for $3 a week or $2 if you are willing to help out in the store some." Relief washed through Clara so powerfully she had to grip the edge of the counter. "Thank you. I would be grateful for the work and the room." "What is your name, girl?" "Clara Garrett." Ruth nodded slowly. "You running from something, Clara Garrett?" Clara met her eyes steadily. "From my past, madam, not from the law. That is all I need to know." Ruth came around the counter and gestured toward a door at the back of the store. "Come on then. Let me show you where you will be staying." The room was small and spare, with whitewashed walls, a narrow iron bed, a pot-bellied stove, and a single window that looked out onto the scrubby desert beyond the town. To Clara, it looked like paradise. She set down her carpetbag and turned to Ruth with genuine gratitude in her eyes. "When would you like me to start?" "Tomorrow morning will be soon enough. You look like you could use some rest." Ruth paused in the doorway. "There is a dress shop 2 streets over, run by a widow named Mrs. Fletcher. She might could use help with sewing if you are as good as you say. I will go see her tomorrow." "Thank you, Mrs. Thompson." When Ruth left, Clara sat down on the bed and let herself feel, just for a moment, the enormity of her loneliness. Then she pushed the feeling away, unpacked her few belongings, and promised herself that she would never again depend on anyone but herself for her happiness or survival. She kept that promise for exactly 3 weeks. Marcus Cole first saw Clara Garrett on a blistering June morning when he rode into town to pick up supplies for his ranch. He had been running cattle on a spread 15 miles northeast of Ash Fork for 5 years, ever since he had saved enough money from his years of cowboy work to buy land and start building something of his own. At 31, he was weathered and lean, with dark hair that curled at his collar and gray eyes that had seen enough of the world to know that good things were rare and worth fighting for. He tied his horse to the rail outside Thompson's General Store and stepped up onto the boardwalk, his spurs jingling softly. The store was busy with the usual mix of ranchers, miners, and railroad workers, and Marcus was reaching for a sack of flour when he saw her. She was standing behind the counter, wrapping a purchase in brown paper for a customer, and Marcus found himself frozen in place. She was not beautiful in the conventional sense, not like the painted ladies in the saloons or the fresh-faced girls in Sunday dresses. Her face was too serious, her mouth too firm, her eyes too wary. But there was something in the way she moved, in the competent quickness of her hands and the straight line of her spine, that made Marcus unable to look away. Ruth Thompson noticed him staring and chuckled. "That is Clara. She has been helping me out the past few weeks. Clara, come meet Marcus Cole. He runs one of the cattle outfits north of town." Clara looked up, and for just a moment their eyes met. Marcus saw wariness there and something deeper, a kind of bone-deep exhaustion that made him want to step forward and offer her something, though he had no idea what. Then she looked away, and the moment passed. "Pleased to meet you, Mr. Cole," she said, her voice polite but distant. "Madam," Marcus replied, tipping his hat. He wanted to say something more, something that would make her look at him again, but the words would not come. Instead, he gathered his supplies, paid, and left the store feeling like he had just missed something important. Over the next few weeks, Marcus found reasons to come into town more often than he strictly needed to. He told himself it was practical, that he was just being efficient about getting supplies, but the truth was he wanted to see Clara again. Each time he came into the store, he tried to talk to her, but she remained polite and distant, never giving him more than a few words before turning away to help another customer or attend to some task. Ruth noticed, of course. She was not a woman who missed much. "You are wasting your time, Marcus," she said one afternoon when Clara had gone to the back room to fetch more stock. "That girl has got walls around her heart higher than the mountains." "What is her story?" Marcus asked, trying to sound casual. Ruth shrugged. "She does not talk about it, but I can guess. She is running from something, and my bet is it is a man. Maybe a husband who mistreated her, maybe a sweetheart who did her wrong. Either way, she is not looking for another one." Marcus should have let it go. He had his ranch to run, cattle to tend, a whole life that did not have room for a woman who did not want to be pursued. But there was something about Clara that had gotten under his skin. It was not just the way she looked, though he found her more appealing every time he saw her. It was the quiet strength in her, the way she faced each day with determination despite whatever pain she was carrying. He recognized something in her because he saw it in himself, that quality of someone who had been knocked down and decided to get back up, no matter how hard it was. One evening in late June, Marcus was loading supplies into his wagon when he saw Clara leaving the store. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, and she was walking toward the small dress shop where she had apparently found additional work. She looked tired, her shoulders slumped slightly, and Marcus made a decision. "Miss Garrett," he called out, jogging to catch up with her. She stopped and turned, and he saw a flash of something, maybe annoyance, maybe fear, cross her face before it smoothed into polite neutrality. "Mr. Cole, I was wondering if I might walk with you a bit," he said, "if you do not mind the company. I am only going to Mrs. Fletcher's shop. I know, I will walk you there." She looked at him for a long moment, and Marcus could almost see her deciding whether to refuse. Finally, she nodded once, and they began walking together down the dusty street. For a while, neither of them spoke. Then Marcus said, "You have been in Ash Fork about a month now, have you not?" "Yes." "You planning to stay?" "I have not decided." "It is a decent town. Small but decent. Folks are mostly honest, and there is work if you are willing to do it." "I have noticed." Marcus tried a different approach. "I have got a ranch north of here. Cattle mostly, some horses. It is hard work, but I like it. It is mine, you know, something I built myself." Clara glanced at him, and for the first time he saw a hint of curiosity in her eyes. "That must be satisfying." "It is." He took a breath. "I am not trying to boast. I just wanted you to know that I am not some drifter or cowhand working for another man's wages. I have got something, and I am building toward something more." They had reached the dress shop, and Clara stopped. She turned to face him, and the wariness was back in her expression. "Why are you telling me this, Mr. Cole?" "Because I would like to know you better, Miss Garrett. I would like to call on you if you would permit it." For a moment, something flickered across her face, something that might have been longing or might have been pain. Then she shook her head. "I am sorry, Mr. Cole, that is not possible." "Why not?" She took a breath, and he could see her struggling with how much to say. "I was married before," she finally said, the words coming out flat and hard. "And I failed. I failed at the one thing a woman is supposed to be able to do, which is make a marriage work. I am not interested in trying again." Marcus felt something tighten in his chest. He could hear the pain beneath her words, the weight of shame and disappointment she was carrying. Without thinking, he stepped closer and said, "Then succeed with me." Clara's eyes widened, and for a moment she just stared at him. "What?" "Succeed with me," Marcus repeated, his voice gentler now. "Whatever happened before, that was not with me. That was somebody else, some other life. I am not asking you to fail again, Clara. I am asking if you might be willing to see if we could succeed together." "You do not know anything about me," she whispered. "Then let me learn. Let me know you. I am not asking for promises or commitments. I am just asking if you will give me a chance to show you that not all men are whatever the one before me was." Clara looked away, and Marcus could see the conflict playing across her face. He waited, barely breathing, until finally she looked back at him. "One walk," she said. "Next Sunday afternoon. That is all I am promising." Relief and hope flooded through Marcus so powerfully he had to fight to keep his expression calm. "One walk." "Thank you, Clara." She nodded once, then turned and went into the dress shop, leaving Marcus standing in the street as the last light faded from the sky. That Sunday, Marcus rode into town in his best shirt, his hair still damp from the bath he had taken in the creek near his ranch. He had shaved carefully, checked his appearance 3 times in the small cracked mirror in his cabin, and told himself repeatedly not to expect too much. It was just one walk. She had made no promises beyond that, but when he saw her waiting outside the general store, wearing a simple blue dress that made her eyes look like the summer sky, he felt hope bloom in his chest despite all his cautions to himself. "Miss Garrett," he said, tipping his hat. "Mr. Cole," she replied, and he thought he detected the faintest hint of a smile. They walked north out of town, following a path that wound between the scrub brush and juniper trees. The afternoon was hot, but a breeze had picked up, making it bearable. For a while, they walked in silence, and Marcus tried to think of something to say that would not sound foolish. "Tell me about your ranch," Clara finally said. Marcus glanced at her, surprised and pleased. "Well, it is not much yet, but it is growing. I have got about 300 head of cattle right now, and I am building the herd up each year. The land is good, plenty of water from a creek that runs through the property. I have got a cabin that is solid enough, though it could use some work. A barn, some corrals. I have got 2 hands working for me, good men who know cattle. It sounds like you have built something to be proud of. I am trying." He paused, then decided to take a risk. "I grew up dirt poor, Clara. My pa was a drunk who could not hold a job, and my ma died when I was 10. I worked cattle drives for years, saving every penny, sleeping on the ground and eating dust. When I finally had enough money to buy land, I swore I would never be poor again. I would never be like my pa, wasting everything on drink and gambling." He looked at her. "I am not telling you this to gain your sympathy. I am telling you because I want you to know that I understand what it is like to start over, to try to build something new from the wreckage of something broken." Clara was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "My husband was a drunk and a gambler too." Marcus stopped walking and turned to face her. "Tell me." She looked away, out at the desert stretching toward the distant mountains. "His name was Thomas. We married when I was 22. I thought I loved him and I thought he loved me. But almost from the day we married, everything changed. He started staying out late, coming home smelling of whiskey. He gambled away money we could not afford to lose. He stopped looking at me like I was someone precious and started looking at me like I was a burden, an obligation he resented." Her voice was steady, but Marcus could hear the pain beneath it. "I tried everything. I tried being the perfect wife, keeping the house spotless, cooking his favorite meals, never complaining. I tried talking to him, begging him, even threatening to leave. Nothing worked. He would promise to change, and he would be better for a few days, and then it would start again. After 2 years, I finally left. My family was horrified. Divorce is a scandal, you see. A good woman is supposed to endure, to suffer silently, to fix her husband through sheer force of virtue. The fact that I could not make my marriage work meant I was a failure, a disgrace." She finally looked at Marcus, and he saw tears shining in her eyes. "So I ran. I came west because I had nowhere else to go and no one who wanted me." Marcus felt anger rise in him, hot and fierce, but he pushed it down. His anger at her former husband and her family would not help Clara now. Instead, he said quietly, "You are not a failure. You were married to a man who failed you and a family that failed you. That is not the same thing." "How can you possibly know that?" Clara asked, and there was a desperate edge to her voice. "You have known me for less than an hour of actual conversation. For all you know, I am a terrible shrew who drove her husband to drink. I know that is not true." "How?" "Because I see how you work. I see how you treat Ruth and her customers. I see the care you take with everything you do, the way you hold yourself together even when you are exhausted. I see someone who is strong and capable and kind, and if your husband could not see that, then he was a fool." Clara looked at him with such surprise and vulnerability that Marcus wanted to reach out and pull her into his arms. But he did not. It was too soon, and she was too fragile. Instead, he just stood there and let her see the sincerity in his eyes. "I do not know if I can trust my own judgment anymore," Clara whispered. "I thought Thomas was a good man, and I was so wrong." "Then take your time," Marcus said. "Let me show you who I am day by day, moment by moment. You do not have to trust me right away. You do not have to trust me at all until you are ready, but give me a chance to prove that I am different from him." Clara took a shaky breath and nodded. "All right, but I cannot promise anything beyond friendship, Marcus. I cannot promise that I will ever be ready for more." "Friendship is enough," Marcus said, and he meant it. Or at least he told himself he did. Over the next several weeks, Marcus courted Clara with a patience he had not known he possessed. He came into town every Sunday after church and took her walking. He brought her small gifts, nothing extravagant or improper, just little things he thought she might like. A pretty stone he found by the creek, a book of poetry he saw in the store and thought she might enjoy, a bundle of wildflowers he picked on his ride into town. He talked to her about his dreams for his ranch, about the kind of life he wanted to build. And slowly, gradually, he began to ask her about herself, about her dreams and hopes and the things that brought her joy. Clara remained guarded, but Marcus could see the walls beginning to lower, inch by inch. She started smiling more when she saw him, started looking forward to their Sunday walks. She told him about her love of sewing, about the satisfaction she found in creating something beautiful from nothing but fabric and thread. She told him about the books she loved to read, about her secret dream of one day having a real library, shelves and shelves of books she could lose herself in. And once, on a particularly warm afternoon in early July, she laughed at something he said, a real laugh that lit up her whole face, and Marcus felt his heart turn over in his chest. But even as they grew closer, Clara kept him at a distance. She would not let him hold her hand, would not let the conversation turn to anything that hinted at a future together. And Marcus respected that, even as it frustrated him. He could see she was healing, but he also knew that healing took time. Then came the day in late July that changed everything. Marcus had come into town to pick up a part for his windmill that Ruth had ordered for him. Clara was in the back of the store, working on inventory, and Marcus was chatting with Ruth when the door banged open and two cowboys stumbled in, clearly drunk despite the early hour. "We need whiskey," one of them slurred, leaning heavily on the counter. Ruth crossed her arms. "I do not sell spirits, boys. You want whiskey, you go to the saloon." "We want it now," the second cowboy said, his voice belligerent. "You got to have some back there somewhere." I said no. "Now get out of my store before I call the sheriff." The first cowboy reached across the counter and grabbed Ruth's arm. "Listen here, you old—" Marcus moved without thinking, grabbing the cowboy's wrist and twisting it away from Ruth. "The lady said no. I suggest you listen." The cowboy spun around, his face flushing with anger, and threw a wild punch. Marcus ducked it easily and shoved the man back toward the door. The second cowboy came at him, and Marcus braced himself, knowing this was about to get ugly. Then Clara was there, stepping between Marcus and the drunk cowboys with an iron skillet she had grabbed from somewhere, her eyes blazing. "Get out," she said, her voice cold and hard. "Get out right now, or I swear I will crack your skulls open." The cowboys stared at her, and for a moment, Marcus thought they might actually be foolish enough to test her. Then the first one muttered something under his breath and stumbled toward the door, his friend following. They left the store, still cursing, and disappeared down the street. Marcus turned to Clara, his heart pounding. "Are you all right?" She nodded, but he could see her hands shaking as she set down the skillet. "Are you?" "I am fine." He stepped closer, wanting to reach out to her but still not sure if she would welcome it. That was very brave and very foolish. "They could have hurt you. They could have hurt you," Clara shot back. "And Ruth. I was not going to just stand there and watch." Marcus looked at her, at the fire still in her eyes and the set of her jaw, and felt something inside him shift and settle. This woman, this strong, fierce, wounded woman, was magnificent, and he was completely in love with her. "Clara," he said softly. She looked up at him, and something in his expression must have given him away because her eyes widened. "Marcus." "I am in love with you," he said, because there did not seem to be any point in hiding it anymore. "I have been falling in love with you since the day I first saw you, and I know you are not ready to hear that, but I cannot keep it to myself anymore. I love you, Clara Garrett, and I want to build a life with you. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep beside you every night. I want to show you every day that you are worth loving, that you are not a failure, that you are the strongest, bravest, most beautiful person I have ever known." Clara stared at him, and Marcus could see a dozen emotions flickering across her face. Fear, longing, hope, terror. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. "I am scared," she whispered. "I know. What if I am as bad at this as I was before? What if I ruin everything? You will not. You cannot know that. Then let us find out together." Marcus took a step closer, close enough that he could have reached out and touched her. "I am not Thomas. I will not drink away our money or gamble away our future. I will not stop seeing you as someone precious. I will not fail you, Clara, and I do not believe you will fail me. Marcus." His name came out as a sob, and then Clara was closing the distance between them, reaching for him with shaking hands. Marcus wrapped his arms around her and pulled her close, feeling her tears soak into his shirt. "I am so scared," she said again, muffled against his chest. "I know," Marcus murmured into her hair. "I know, sweetheart, but I have got you, and I am not letting go." They stood there for a long moment, holding each other while Ruth looked on with satisfaction from behind the counter. Finally, Clara pulled back just enough to look up at Marcus. "I think I might be falling in love with you too," she said, and her voice was small and uncertain but also hopeful, and that hope was everything. Marcus smiled, feeling joy wash through him like sunlight. "Then that is a good start." After that day, everything changed. Clara stopped holding Marcus at arm's length and started letting him into her life in ways she had not before. She let him hold her hand when they walked. She accepted his invitations to dinner at the small restaurant in town. She talked to him about her fears and her past, and he listened without judgment, offering comfort when she needed it and space when she did not. In August, Marcus took Clara out to see his ranch for the first time. They rode out on a Sunday morning, Clara sitting side saddle on a gentle mare Marcus had borrowed from a friend. The day was hot, but not unbearable, and the sky was a brilliant blue dotted with white clouds. As they rode up over a rise and the ranch came into view, Marcus watched Clara's face anxiously. The cabin was small and weathered, the barn needed a coat of paint, and the corrals were rough but functional. It was not much, not yet, but it was his, and he wanted Clara to see the potential in it. Clara reined in her horse and sat quietly, looking out over the land. Marcus could see his small herd of cattle grazing in the distance, could see the creek glinting in the sunlight, could see the mountains rising up beyond. He held his breath, waiting. "It is beautiful," Clara finally said, and there was wonder in her voice. "Marcus, it is beautiful." Relief and pride swelled in his chest. "You think so?" "I do." She turned to look at him, and there was something new in her eyes, something he had not seen before. "I can see what you are building here. I can see what it could become." "I am glad." Marcus hesitated, then said, "I want you to see yourself here, Clara. I want you to imagine a future here with me." Clara looked back at the ranch, and Marcus saw her throat move as she swallowed. "I am trying," she said quietly. "I am trying to imagine that, and it does not scare me as much as it did before." It was not a commitment, but it was progress, and Marcus took it. He showed her around the property, introducing her to his two ranch hands, Jim and Lewis, who were polite and respectful and clearly curious about the woman their boss had brought home. He showed her the cabin, which was sparse but clean, with a good stove and a sturdy bed and windows that let in plenty of light. He showed her the garden plot he had been meaning to plant, but had not had time to tend. And as they walked, he talked about his plans, about the cattle he wanted to buy next spring, about the improvements he wanted to make to the cabin and barn, about the life he was building. Clara listened, asking questions and offering suggestions, and Marcus could see her relaxing, could see her starting to imagine herself as part of this place. They ate lunch by the creek, sitting on a blanket Marcus had brought, eating the sandwiches and pie Ruth had packed for them. The water burbled over the rocks, and a breeze rustled through the cottonwood trees, and for a while they just sat in comfortable silence. Thomas never talked to me about his plans, Clara said suddenly. He never asked my opinion about anything. He made decisions and expected me to just accept them, and if I questioned him, he would get angry. Marcus set down his sandwich and turned to look at her. I am not Thomas. I know. Clara met his eyes. You keep showing me that you are not, and I think I am finally starting to believe it. Good. Marcus reached out and took her hand, lacing their fingers together. Because I meant what I said, Clara. I want to build a life with you. And that means it is our life, not just mine. Your opinions matter. Your dreams matter. You matter. Clara's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. How did you get to be so good? I am not that good. I am just a man who knows what he wants and is willing to work for it. And I want you. Clara leaned over and kissed him, soft and sweet and tentative. It was their first kiss, and Marcus felt it all the way down to his bones. When she pulled back, her cheeks were flushed and her eyes were bright. I want you to, she whispered. I am still scared, but I want you to. Then that is enough, Marcus said, pulling her close. That is more than enough. As summer turned to fall, Marcus and Clara's relationship deepened. They saw each other as often as they could, which was not as often as either of them would have liked. Marcus had his ranch to run, and Clara had her work at the store and the dress shop. But they wrote letters to each other between visits, and Marcus came into town every Sunday without fail, and slowly, steadily, they built something real and solid between them. In September, Marcus asked Clara to marry him. They were sitting on the porch of his cabin, watching the sun set over the mountains, when he pulled a small box from his pocket and opened it. Inside was a simple gold band, nothing fancy, but Clara gasped when she saw it. Clara Garrett, Marcus said, turning to face her. I love you more than I thought it was possible to love another person. I want to spend the rest of my life proving to you that you are worthy of love, that you are not a failure, that you are everything good and right in this world. Will you marry me? Clara looked at the ring, then at Marcus, and he could see the fear and the hope warring in her expression. I am still scared, she said, I know. What if I am a terrible wife? You will not be. What if Marcus leaned forward and kissed her, cutting off her words? When he pulled back, he said, Clara, I am not asking you to be perfect. I am not even asking you to be sure. I am just asking you to take a chance on us. To succeed with me, remember? Clara took a shaky breath, and then, slowly, she nodded. Yes, she whispered. Yes, Marcus, I will marry you. Joy exploded through Marcus like fireworks. He slipped the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into his arms and kissed her again, deeper this time, pouring all his love and hope and promise into it. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing hard and Clara was laughing, a sound of pure, unrestrained happiness that made Marcus's heart soar. I love you, she said, and this time there was no hesitation in her voice. I love you, Marcus Cole, and I am going to do everything in my power to make you happy. You already do, Marcus said, pulling her close. You already do, sweetheart. They were married in late October in a simple ceremony at the small church in Ash Fork. Ruth and her husband stood up for them, along with Jim and Louis from the ranch and Mrs. Fletcher from the dress shop. Clara wore a dress she had sewn herself, simple but elegant in cream-colored silk, and Marcus wore his best suit, brushed clean of dust and pressed carefully. The ceremony was short and sweet, and when the preacher pronounced them man and wife, Marcus kissed Clara with such tenderness and joy that several people in the small congregation had to wipe away tears. After the ceremony, Ruth hosted a small reception at the general store. There was cake and lemonade, and someone produced a fiddle, and there was dancing and laughter and well wishes. Clara glowed with happiness, her hand never leaving Marcus's, and Marcus felt like the luckiest man in the Arizona Territory. As the sun began to set, Marcus and Clara said their goodbyes and rode out to the ranch together. Clara rode beside him now, not side saddle but astride, wearing a split riding skirt she had made for herself. She had been practicing riding over the past few months, determined to be able to move around the ranch easily, and Marcus loved her for it, loved her determination to become part of his world. When they reached the cabin, Marcus dismounted and then helped Clara down, his hands lingering on her waist. She looked up at him, her eyes shining in the fading light. "Are you happy?" Marcus asked. "I am terrified," Clara said honestly. "But yes, I am happy too." Marcus smiled and scooped her up into his arms, making her squeal with surprise. "Then, let me carry my bride over the threshold and show her just how happy we are going to be." He carried her into the cabin, which he had spent the past week cleaning and preparing. There were fresh flowers on the table, candles lit and glowing softly, and the bed was made up with new quilts Clara had not seen before. She looked around, her eyes wide, and Marcus set her gently on her feet. "You did all this?" she asked. "I wanted our first night as husband and wife to be special." Clara turned to face him, and Marcus saw tears shining in her eyes again, but this time they were tears of joy. "It is perfect," she whispered. "You are perfect." "I am far from perfect, Clara. But I will spend every day of the rest of my life trying to be the man you deserve." Clara reached up and cupped his face in her hands. "You already are," she said. Then she kissed him, and Marcus lost himself in the taste and feel of her, in the knowledge that she was his wife, his partner, his future. They made love that night with a tenderness and passion that took both their breaths away. Clara was nervous at first, her body stiff with old fears, but Marcus was patient and gentle, taking his time, showing her with every touch and kiss that she was cherished, that she was safe. And when Clara finally let go, when she surrendered herself to the pleasure and the love, she cried out his name with such joy that Marcus felt his own heart break open. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the bed, Clara's head resting on Marcus's chest, his arms wrapped around her. The candles had burned down to stubs, and the moon was rising outside the window, casting silver light across the floor. "Thank you," Clara whispered into the darkness. "For what?" "For not giving up on me, for being patient, for showing me that I could trust again." Marcus tightened his arms around her. "You never have to thank me for that, sweetheart. Loving you is the easiest thing I have ever done." Clara tilted her head up to look at him, and even in the dim light, Marcus could see the love shining in her eyes. "I am going to succeed with you, Marcus. I promise you that. I know you will. We will succeed together." And they did. The first months of their marriage were an adjustment, as all marriages are. Clara had to learn the rhythms of ranch life, the early mornings and the hard work, the isolation and the occasional dangers. There were moments when she was overwhelmed, when she missed the relative ease of her life in town, when she wondered if she had made a mistake. But Marcus was always there, steady and patient and loving. He taught her how to handle the horses, how to help with the cattle when needed, how to shoot a rifle in case of emergency. He encouraged her to continue her sewing work, bringing fabric back from town so she could make clothes and quilts to sell. He built her shelves for the books she was slowly collecting, and he read to her in the evenings by firelight. And he never, not once, made her feel like she was failing or not enough. Slowly, Clara began to bloom. The wariness in her eyes faded, replaced by confidence and joy. She started to laugh more, to smile more, to let herself be happy. She made the cabin into a real home, adding curtains and rugs and little touches that made the space warm and welcoming. She planted a garden in the spring, and it flourished under her care, providing them with fresh vegetables through the summer. And she stood by Marcus's side as he built his ranch, offering advice and support and hard work when needed. Their first real test came in the winter of 1884, when a blizzard swept through the territory, burying the ranch under feet of snow. They were trapped in the cabin for days, the world outside a howling white fury. Marcus was anxious about the cattle, worried they would lose animals to the cold, but there was nothing he could do but wait. Clara held him through those long days, keeping the fire burning, cooking hot meals, distracting him with stories and games and lovemaking. And when the storm finally passed and Marcus went out to check on the herd, she bundled up and went with him, trudging through the deep snow to help search for any animals that might be in trouble. They lost a few head, but not as many as Marcus had feared. And as they worked together to get the surviving cattle to shelter and food, Marcus looked at Clara, her cheeks flushed with cold and her eyes bright with determination, and fell in love with her all over again. "You are amazing," he told her that night as they warmed themselves by the fire. Clara smiled, leaning against him. "We are amazing," she corrected. "Together." In the spring of 1885, Clara told Marcus she was pregnant. She had suspected for a few weeks, but she waited until she was certain before telling him. They were sitting at the table eating breakfast when she finally worked up the courage to say the words, "Marcus, I have something to tell you." He looked up from his plate, immediately attentive. "What is it?" "I am going to have a baby." Marcus stared at her, his fork frozen halfway to his mouth. Then slowly a smile spread across his face, growing wider and wider until it seemed to take up his whole face. "You are." "I am." Clara felt tears prick her eyes. "Are you happy?" Marcus pushed back from the table and pulled her into his arms, lifting her right off her feet and spinning her around. "Happy? Clara, I am over the moon. We are going to have a baby," Clara laughed, clinging to him, feeling the last of her old fears dissolve in the face of his joy. They were going to have a baby, a child born out of love and hope, not out of duty or obligation. A child who would grow up knowing he or she was wanted and cherished. "I hope I will be a good mother," she said when Marcus set her down. "You will be an amazing mother," Marcus said firmly. "Just like you are an amazing wife and an amazing person." The pregnancy was not easy. Clara suffered from morning sickness that lasted well into the afternoon, and as she grew larger, she found the heat of the summer oppressive. But Marcus was attentive and caring, doing everything he could to make her comfortable. He took over most of the heavy work around the cabin, insisted she rest whenever she was tired, and rubbed her aching back and feet without complaint. In November, as the weather was starting to turn cold again, Clara went into labor. Marcus had arranged for Ruth to come out to the ranch to help with the birth, along with a midwife from town named Mrs. Callahan. But the baby came faster than anyone expected, and by the time Ruth and Mrs. Callahan arrived, Clara was already deep in labor, gripping Marcus's hand so hard she was sure she was breaking his bones. The pain was worse than anything Clara had ever imagined, wave after wave of it crashing over her until she thought she would drown. But Marcus stayed by her side the entire time, wiping her face with a cool cloth, murmuring words of encouragement, never once flinching even when she screamed or cursed. And then, finally, after what felt like an eternity, she heard it, the thin, furious wail of a newborn baby. "It is a boy, Mrs. Callahan announced, holding up the tiny, red-faced infant. "You have a son." Clara collapsed back against the pillows, exhausted and overwhelmed and happier than she had ever been in her life. Marcus was crying, tears streaming down his face as Mrs. Callahan cleaned the baby and then placed him in Clara's arms. "A son," Marcus whispered, staring down at the infant with wonder. "We have a son, Clara." Clara looked down at the tiny face, at the miniature fingers curled into fists, at the dark hair plastered to his head, and felt her heart expand until she thought it might burst. "He is perfect," she breathed. They named him Daniel, after Marcus's grandfather, and from the moment he was born, he was the center of their world. Marcus was a devoted father, getting up in the middle of the night to help with feedings, changing diapers without complaint, and spending every spare moment holding his son and marveling at him. Clara, despite her earlier fears, discovered that motherhood came naturally to her. She loved the feel of Daniel in her arms, loved watching him grow and change, loved the way he looked at her with complete trust and adoration. Life settled into a new rhythm after Daniel was born. The ranch continued to grow and prosper, Marcus adding to his herd each year and making improvements to the property. Clara balanced caring for Daniel with her sewing work and helping around the ranch, and together they built a life filled with love and laughter and hard work. In the spring of 1887, Clara gave birth to their second child, a daughter they named Rose. Where Daniel had been a serious, quiet baby, Rose was all sunshine and smiles from the start. She had Clara's eyes and Marcus's dark hair, and she wrapped her father around her tiny finger from the moment she was born. Marcus was even more besotted with Rose than he had been with Daniel, carrying her around the ranch in a sling Clara made, singing to her in his rough, off-key voice, and refusing to put her down even when she was sleeping. Clara would find them sometimes, Marcus sitting in his chair by the fire, Rose asleep on his chest, both of them peaceful and content, and her heart would overflow with gratitude for the life they had built together. By 1890, the ranch was thriving. Marcus had expanded his herd to over 1,000 head of cattle, had built a new barn and several additional outbuildings, and had hired more hands to help with the work. The cabin had been expanded too, with additional rooms for the children and a real parlor where Clara could sew and the family could gather in the evenings. They were not wealthy, but they were comfortable, and more importantly, they were happy. One evening in late summer, after the children had been put to bed, Marcus and Clara sat on the porch watching the sun set. Clara was working on a quilt, her needle flashing in the fading light, and Marcus was whittling a toy horse for Daniel. It was a scene they had repeated countless times over the years, comfortable and familiar and deeply satisfying. "You remember when we first met?" Marcus asked suddenly. Clara looked up, smiling. "Of course I do. You kept coming into the store and staring at me like I was some sort of puzzle you were trying to solve. You were a puzzle, all those walls you had built up around yourself. And you were annoyingly persistent in trying to tear them down." Marcus laughed. "I prefer to think of it as determined." Clara set down her sewing and reached over to take his hand. "I am glad you were. I do not know where I would be right now if you had not been so determined. You would have been fine. You are one of the strongest people I know, Clara. Maybe. But I would not have been happy. Not like this." She gestured around them, at the ranch, at the cabin, at the life they had built. "This is everything I never knew I wanted, everything I was too scared to hope for." Marcus brought her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "Do you remember what you said to me that first night I asked to court you? I said I had been married before and failed. And do you remember what I said back?" Clara's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. "You said to succeed with you, and have we succeeded?" Clara looked at her husband, at the man who had shown her what real love looked like, who had been patient when she was afraid and strong when she was weak, who had given her a home and a family and a future. "Yes," she whispered, "we have succeeded, Marcus, beyond my wildest dreams." Marcus pulled her close, and they sat there together as the stars came out, holding each other and watching the night settle over their land. As the years passed, Daniel and Rose grew into fine young people. Daniel inherited his father's love of ranching and his mother's quiet strength, while Rose had her mother's creativity and her father's determination. The ranch continued to prosper, becoming one of the most successful operations in the territory. In 1895, Clara gave birth to their third child, another son they named James. He was a surprise, coming when Clara was 36 and had thought her childbearing years were behind her. But he was a welcome surprise, a happy, energetic boy who kept them all on their toes. Marcus was 56 by then, his hair more gray than dark, his face weathered by years in the sun. But he was still strong and vital, still running the ranch with the same passion and dedication he had always had. And he still looked at Clara every day like she was the most precious thing in his world. Clara, for her part, had blossomed over the years into a confident, capable woman who bore little resemblance to the frightened, wounded person who had stepped off the train in Ash Fork all those years ago. She ran the household with efficiency, continued her sewing work, and was known throughout the territory as someone you could count on for help or advice. The past still touched her sometimes, particularly on the rare occasions when she heard news from St. Louis or thought about the family that had disowned her. But those moments grew fewer and further between, and when they came, Marcus was always there to remind her that the past was past, and their present and future were what mattered. In the summer of 1900, when Clara was 41 and Marcus was 61, they celebrated their 15th wedding anniversary. Their children organized a party, inviting neighbors from miles around, and the ranch was filled with music and laughter and joy. Ruth and her husband came, both of them old now but still sharp and kind. Mrs. Fletcher came, along with dozens of other people whose lives Clara and Marcus had touched over the years. As the party wound down and the guests began to leave, Clara and Marcus stood together on the porch, watching the last of the wagons disappear down the road. Daniel was 24 now, working the ranch alongside his father and courting a sweet girl from town. Rose was 13, full of life and dreams of becoming a teacher. And James was 5, a whirlwind of energy who never stopped asking questions or getting into mischief. "We did all right, did we not?" Marcus said, his arm around Clara's waist. "We did better than all right," Clara replied, leaning into him. "We built something wonderful, Marcus. A family, a home, a life. We succeeded. We did." Marcus turned to look at her, and even after 15 years of marriage, Clara felt her heart skip at the love in his eyes. "I am so glad you took a chance on me, Clara. So glad you let me show you that not all men are like the one who hurt you. I am glad, too. You saved me, Marcus. You saved me from myself and from my past, and you gave me a future I never thought I could have. You saved yourself, sweetheart. I just loved you while you did it." Clara reached up and kissed him, slow and sweet and full of all the love she felt for this man who had changed her life. When they broke apart, they stood there for a long moment, just holding each other and listening to the sounds of their children playing inside. "Do you ever regret it?" Clara asked quietly. "Marrying a divorced woman with a past?" Marcus pulled back and looked at her with surprise. "Not for a single second. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Clara Cole. You and our children and this life we built together. I would not change a moment of it. Even the hard parts, they made us who we are." Clara smiled, feeling the last lingering shadow of her old shame finally fade away. She had been so afraid for so long that her past defined her, that her failure in her first marriage meant she was somehow damaged or unworthy. But Marcus had shown her, day after day and year after year, that her past was just that, past. It had shaped her, yes, but it did not define her. She defined herself through her choices and her actions and the love she gave and received. "I love you, Marcus Cole," she said, her voice strong and sure. "I love you too, Clara Cole, today, tomorrow, and always." They stood there together as the sun set, watching the colors paint the sky, and Clara felt a deep, abiding sense of peace. She had succeeded. They had succeeded together, just as Marcus had said they would all those years ago. The years that followed were good ones. Daniel married his sweetheart, a girl named Sarah, and they gave Marcus and Clara their first grandchild in 1902, a boy they named Marcus after his grandfather. Rose went off to school to become a teacher, returning home during summers to help on the ranch and fill the house with stories of her adventures. James grew into a thoughtful, intelligent boy with a gift for numbers who dreamed of one day opening a bank. Marcus began to slow down as he entered his late 60s, though he refused to stop working entirely. He turned over more and more of the day-to-day running of the ranch to Daniel, but he still rode out every day to check on the cattle and the land he loved. Clara worried about him sometimes, seeing the way he would wince when he thought she was not looking, the way he moved more stiffly in the mornings. But when she tried to get him to rest more, he would just smile and kiss her forehead and tell her he would have plenty of time to rest when he was dead. In the spring of 1905, Marcus had a mild heart episode that scared them both. The doctor from town ordered him to take it easy, and for once, Marcus listened. He spent more time in the house, helping Clara with the accounts and the household management, playing with his growing number of grandchildren, and reading the books Clara had collected over the years. It was during this time, as they sat together in the evenings, that they began to tell each other the stories of their lives, filling in the gaps and sharing memories they had never shared before. Clara talked about her childhood, about her parents and siblings, about the dreams she had before her first marriage. Marcus talked about his years as a cowboy, about the hard work and the danger and the camaraderie of life on the trail. And they both talked about the moment they met, about the strange pull they had felt toward each other, about the leap of faith they had taken in choosing to build a life together. "You ever wish we had met sooner?" Clara asked one evening. "Before I was married the first time?" Marcus considered the question, then shook his head. "No, I do not think so. I was not ready for you before. I was too young, too focused on making money and building my ranch, and you needed to go through what you went through to become the woman you are now. I do not think we would have worked if we had met any earlier." "Maybe you are right." Clara leaned her head on his shoulder. "I just hate that you had to see me so broken when we met." "You were not broken, Clara. You were healing. And it was an honor to be part of that healing, to watch you become strong and whole again." Clara's eyes filled with tears. Even after all these years, Marcus could still say things that reached right into her heart. "I hope you know how much you mean to me, how much this life we built means to me." "I do." Marcus kissed the top of her head. "And I hope you know the same about you. You are my everything, Clara. You always have been." They sat there together as the fire burned low, holding hands and watching the flames, and Clara thought about all the years they had shared, all the joys and sorrows, all the moments big and small that had woven together to create their life, and she felt nothing but gratitude. Marcus lived for another 3 years, dying peacefully in his sleep in the winter of 1908 at the age of 69. Clara woke one morning to find him still beside her, his face peaceful, his hand still holding hers. The grief was overwhelming, a tidal wave that threatened to pull her under. But as she sat there, holding Marcus's hand and crying, she also felt a deep sense of thankfulness. They had had 25 years together, 25 years of love and partnership and building a life. Not everyone got that. Not everyone got to experience the kind of love she and Marcus had shared. The funeral was attended by what seemed like half the territory. Marcus had been respected and well-liked, known for his honesty and fairness and his willingness to help a neighbor in need. Person after person came up to Clara to tell her stories of how Marcus had helped them, had given them advice or work or just a kind word when they needed it most. And Clara listened to each story with pride and sorrow, knowing that the man she had loved had left a legacy far beyond their ranch and their family. After Marcus was buried, Clara threw herself into the work of living. She had her children and grandchildren to care for, the ranch to help run, her sewing to keep her busy. She missed Marcus every day, missed his voice and his touch and his steady presence beside her. But she also felt him with her, in the house they had built together, in the land they had worked together, in the children they had raised together. Daniel took over running the ranch completely now, and he did it with the same dedication and love his father had shown. Sarah was a wonderful daughter-in-law, caring for Clara and making sure she was never alone. Rose came home from her teaching position to stay with her mother for several months, and James, now working at a bank in Flagstaff, visited as often as he could. Clara lived for another 12 years after Marcus died, passing away peacefully in her sleep in 1920 at the age of 61. In those years, she saw the ranch continue to thrive under Daniel's management. She saw Rose marry a kind schoolteacher and start a family of her own. She saw James become successful in his banking career and marry a lovely woman he met in Flagstaff. She saw her grandchildren grow and welcomed several great-grandchildren into the world. But more than any of that, she spent those years remembering and honoring the man who had saved her, who had looked at a broken, frightened woman and seen someone worth fighting for. Marcus had told her to succeed with him, and they had. They had built a life filled with love and meaning, had raised a family, had created something lasting and good. On the night before she died, Clara sat in the chair Marcus had always favored, looking out at the ranch bathed in moonlight. She thought about that day so many years ago when she had stepped off the train in Ash Fork, lost and alone and convinced she was a failure. And she thought about Marcus, about the way he had looked at her with such certainty and said, "Then succeed with me." They had succeeded. Against all odds, despite her fears and his patience, they had built something beautiful. And as Clara closed her eyes for the last time, she was smiling, knowing that soon she would see Marcus again, and they would have eternity to continue the success they had started so many years ago in a dusty railroad town in Arizona. The ranch stayed in the family for generations, a testament to Marcus and Clara's love and hard work. And the story of the cowboy and the divorced woman who took a chance on each other became family legend, passed down from parents to children, a reminder that it is never too late to start over, never too late to take a chance on love, and that sometimes the greatest success comes from having the courage to try again.